In Michelle Alexander's book, she says the prison, even in the video, she says the prison system has quadrupled, and it has little to do with crime. In less than 30 years, the prisons have gone from having 300,000, this is in the United States, from 300,000 prisoners to 2 million, and those are mostly for drug offenses. How did this happen? 300,000 to 2 million.
Well, you know, it's interesting how things happen. It has a lot to do with silence. You know, there's increasing black middle class and white middle class. This is a new kind of silent majority. See, this is one of the differences between the systems. We're talking about the 18th, 19th, and 20th century, which was dominated by white folks. Now we have the mass incarceration. That's not a total dominance of white folks, because there's some black folks within the system, working in the prisons, as police officers, and increasing. And see, most of us in the middle class are silent. We don't say nothing. We get good jobs. We become mayors of cities. We become on school boards. And we don't say anything. We don't say anything. And she points out, we don't say anything. We say something about crime, and we're supposed to say something about crime. But we don't say anything about the creation of crime. Because when there's a law, when there's legislation, we sign up too. We don't have nothing to say. So we are not excused from this problem. We can't eliminate ourselves from this problem. We have to understand that we're a major part of this problem. When the Congressional Black Caucus are asked to vote, they vote like everybody else for the most part. They might have 4 or 5 not voting for Bill Clinton, 3 strikes you're out. But, you know, we get fooled. We get fooled by the increasing number of our children, and it's a good thing. Our children going to school, it's a good thing. Increasing number of folks with good jobs, which is a good thing. But what comes along with that? You know what comes along with that? Silence. And when the majority feels that there's silence, they don't do anything. So we have to understand that this mass incarceration is a moral crisis with political, and as Deborah mentioned, with political and social consequences for America's future. We're not just talking about black folks' future, we're talking about America's future. And so, what are we going to do about it? What's the answer to this?
Well, I would...
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just maybe modify a little bit, because I think your question, how did we get here?
How did we get from 300,000 in prison in 1972 to 2 million?
Yeah, to
today?
A series of policy changes. The so-called war on crime, the so-called war on drugs, policy changes, and ordinary citizens have not had direct influence over policy changes. Yeah, people can raise voices, people can have a hue and cry about any number of things, as people did recently in Wisconsin. We're not talking about mass incarceration, but people took to the streets in Wisconsin. People were sleeping at the State House door in Wisconsin. But the state still managed to dissolve collective bargaining. And just this week, the Supreme Court of Wisconsin upheld that, all right? So it's important to hold citizens responsible for social and political developments, but it's also important to understand the political machinery. Policy changes were responsible.
I want to detail, so just to add on to this, I want to detail what some of those policy changes were, right? So you have to recognize that between 1980 and 1984, so in 4 years, FBI anti-drug funding went from $8 million to $95 million, okay? That Operation Pipeline put in by Reagan allowed police officers to do a series of actions that allowed them to arrest people. So one of these things are called pretextual traffic stops, right? Which allows you to pull over a driver for any minor traffic violation, including rolling at a stop sign, right? Not turning on your turn signal, something like this. You pull them over, you convince them, you ask them for consent, right? So what person is going to say, no, police officer, you cannot look in my car, right? So they use intimidation factors to consent the car, to search for the car. And then if the person says, no, I don't want you to, then they say, well, okay, well, what if I bring my drug dogs over here? What am I going to find, right? So they intimidate them even more into allowing them to seize their car.
Is this for blacks, Hefzibah, or all people?
This is all people, but we have to recognize that blacks are targeted, right? Mm-hmm. That blacks, when you look at the amount of people that are pulled over on the New Jersey Turnpike, the amount of people that are pulled over are blacks, even though that we show that when police officers pull over whites, they are actually more successful in finding drugs for the whites that they pull over percentage-wise than the blacks that they pull over. They also go by this thing called the drug courier profile. You know what this profile is? I look nervous or I look too calm. I have luggage or I don't have luggage. I have a good-looking car or I have a bad-looking car, right? So the drug courier profile that police are allowed to go by includes absolutely any number of characteristics. So when we're talking about policies and we're pulling people over, this is what matters, and this is how the prison system has really grown so quickly.
If I may, I don't want to monopolize, but when
yes, you do.
No, I don't. But when Hefzibah mentioned the drug courier, I just wanted to give an anecdote. I taught at Duke University for a semester, and I took the plane every Wednesday morning and came back every Wednesday evening. And so one week, I came back on Wednesday evening. I left again on Friday morning to go to give a talk somewhere. And when I came back that evening, these three plainclothes people approached me. I didn't know who they were, and they pulled me over and asked if they could search my bag. And I said, why? But you're right. When this guy takes the badge out, mm-hmm. which I've only seen on television, but I know what that means, I just hand him the bag. Mm-hmm. So one of them asks for my ID. I give him my ID, and he says to the other one, she's a university professor. So they are kind of stumbling and fumbling. But they tell me that I fit the profile of a drug courier because I travel frequently and I have a small bag. I think I just look like a regular, ordinary school teacher, which is what I am. But I was stopped at the Charlottesville airport and told that they had been keeping track of my movements for that entire semester. They knew I went out on Wednesday, came back on Wednesday, but it happened that on Friday I went to Miami, and that is when they closed in on me.
Before we get you all's two comments, so the war on drugs, which started in 1982, under President Reagan, correct? It happened when crime was on the decline. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So was it about crime, or was it racially political? Make you all's 2 points. Go ahead, Doug. Yeah, Mr. Shea.
First of all, I think you have to go back to the Nixon administration when Nixon won the presidency by a Southern strategy by bringing disaffected whites into the Republican Party in the wake of the civil rights movement.
I don't think I was born then.
No. Now, but I want to say, in the Reagan times, there are other people here, Andrea, who are too young to remember when we didn't have military units in the police force of every city in the country. Tax squads, they're called. I mean, we didn't used to have these things. Now, where did they come from? They came from federal funding connected with the war on drugs. they have succeeded with a lot of money of militarizing the local police force of every little town and big city in America. And these, in order to keep their funding, they've got to maintain a certain level of arrests. And of course, now you put this together with the targeting of certain populations, and you've got mass
So you're saying-
incarceration and 2 million people in prison.
When it was implemented, was the black community in mind?
I believe.
Not that they would
I
admit
believe-
that, but was
I
it?
believe, partly from reading her book, partly from my own experience, that yes, it was. It was the cynical view of the National Republican Party to build its political base by taking working class white people out of the Democratic Party and making them loyal Republicans by being the champions of this war, which obviously targeted black people. And, you know, black people all of a sudden on television, they were criminals. And every detective and police show on television, as she very well documents,
Wow.
you see the black drug dealer.